Hello there, my beautiful creatures of the beyond and you superb internet. I have done something crazy, and I think you guys might find this interesting. So, let's say I have created a small rectangular shape over here, and I called it test. Now, let's just say I'm going to open a page and we have a big problem. As you can see, this is our file where it's located at the moment. And I literally just open it like I usually open a file in a browser. And the first thing we see, and this is unfortunately something that I currently do not have a solution for, but basically I think that not all filters are supported in browsers because there are some that are broken here. Not all of them, but some of them, and I could not be bothered to go through the troubleshooting of understanding how and why at the moment, but this is less important. But we also observe something over here. We have blocked an autoplay. And we have played sounds before. But let me show you something. So this is us looking at something that's running here in the background. And if I try to allow the audio, nothing happens. And that is because we get this specific error over here. And this means, in simple terms, that it cannot play this specific sound the way I have implemented it because we are accessing the page itself through a file. So there is, so what I've done is very finicky, but also very powerful. So this thing here requires us, it's a stupid, weird thing with the output silence and blah, blah, blah. But basically it tells us that we need to use a HTTP or HTTPS protocol. In other words, we would have to put this on a server. And since I don't want to put it live on a server, you can, and I think I've talked about this, you can install something called AXMPP. It's an Apache server. You download it, install it, and then you just run it. And I have it installed already. So now let me try to run it. So basically I'm gonna just use localhost new, and in this case we want to run the SVG first. So I'm gonna close this and this. And I'm gonna run the SVG we've been working on. And can you hear it? Something is happening, something is playing in the background. And look, we're having values here. But let me show you something better. Our rectangle is popping up here and disappearing. And you might wonder why. So, if you look very carefully at this thing with the average frequency value, sometimes you see that they peak. And they're peaking past a certain value. Like when we hear the thunder, it's very powerful. So when this happens, our small piece here of the rectangle is popping up. So let's have a look over what's gonna happen. But there are a few caveats with this. First of all, when you load the page, you will get the autoplay as disabled, so you have to enable it manually. And this is because browsers these days disable autoplay by default. This is why you don't see websites playing music in the background automatically. And first of all, it's annoying to just open something and perhaps you're listening to music and then something else starts playing because you just open a page. And second of all, this is just the standard across the internet. So, running this locally, we are doing a few things in the SVG in order for this to work. So I'll just, oh, and one cool thing is if I mute this, you see the average goes to 0. So this is tied directly to how your browser is working. This is not happening on the server or on the, well, it is happening through the file, but basically the browser dictates how the interaction between the script, the file, and the sound is happening. So the browser can interrupt this. So you have to understand this. There are two types of interactions when you're handling files, for example, on a web page. But it can stop playing sounds, it can stop displaying CSS, and it can even stop the interaction with the JavaScript. And this is because these are server-side processes, not server processes like HTML. It's a bit complicated, but the point is that your browser is the master on how these things happen. And this is also another reason why I think these things are not supported fully. And SVGs are a bit finicky, but the advantage of SVGs is that they are running on the server partially, but you can't disable an SVG file through the browser. Or perhaps there are some advanced feature that you can manually go through the about config settings in your browser, and then you might be able to disable certain things, but that's totally advanced. Anyway, I know it's a big tangent on what I went about, but I want to underline the fact that what I did here is basically an experiment and is not very useful in practice. Although it can be circumvented with clever coding, but personally I'm not a coder. Even the code for this script is not written by me. I had to dig through the internet. But yeah, you can do some wild things. So let's look into our rectangle over here. So our rectangle has ID test. No, actually the ID is Thunderbox in this case. Sorry, the label is test. So this is important. This ID, we're going to use it because right now, if we look at our scripting, we have enabled external scripting. I don't know why it's not saving it here. Is it embedded? No. It's not displaying it here, but it is embedded. I suppose when I close the file, it just disappears from there. So in order to check that, we go into our XML and we can see that we have the script over here. in this case is measure sound.js. Perfect. Now, what is happening here? I also gave this Thunderbox. I gave it an opacity 0. I could have just hidden it in the layers normally, but I wanted to control it directly through the CSS. Now this is embedded CSS. So this is the first line, but then I have associated a second line, which is hidden in the XML. And again, this is quite advanced and complicated how I did it, but this is the best way it works. So this is the first style. Sorry, the first style is over here with the opacity. And then I have embedded a secondary style, which this one is activated. So basically this keyframe, which is doing an opacity from 0 to 1, because right now everything is set to 0, is going to be imported into the animation here in the animate class. And then it's this basically means that it's going to try to reach the end of the animation. But this one is not attached to anything. And this is because we are attaching this class to this rectangle using the JavaScript. And the JavaScript is external. So let's have a look at our JavaScript. Now again, don't just copy paste things from online. Try to understand what you're working with. I don't fully understand all the Java because, as I said, I'm not a programmer, but I understand at least 80% of what I put here. So this is our JavaScript. It is quite chunky. Let's rid of these things. It is chunky, but it has some very, very powerful things happening in here. So the first thing that we do is load this the moment the file, the SVG file, is imported into our browser. So right now, when we press enter, this starts running. Okay. So next, we're gonna go and select our Thunderbox, which is basically our element ID. In this case, it's our hidden rectangle, which has this ID. And then we say that this is basically displayed over here. If I'm gonna go all the way up, you see Thunderbox is, well, not clicked. Whatever, is selected. Initially I was doing it with click, but whatever. So then this is where the magic is happening. And this part, I don't fully know how it works. As I said, I have taken this code from somewhere else, from an example. But basically, this is loading our audio file, which is an MP3. And then it starts looking at the values of the sounds, the bass, the peak, everything. I don't know them. I'm amusical. I have no idea what exactly he's looking. This is an analyzer basically. So it analyzes the sounds, how they go up and down, and then it goes through this filter, and I suppose 256 is the maximum value. And then it creates this buffer length, this buffer zone, and I'll explain why this buffer zone is important. So this tells us that the audio is playing. It's not looping, it's just gonna play once. But for now, this is okay for us. And then this is gonna detect the peaks from this buffer zone. So basically we start at 0 and this for means that it's creating a cycle. It's going through every time the sound is playing, because the sound is constantly playing as long as the MP3 is in the background. And then it does this mathematical formula here, and then it tells me that the average frequency is, and we can see the average frequency over here. So basically we get a number. So what is important for us is this number over here, the average. And this is the threshold. Basically, when this threshold is hit, it's equal or bigger than 45, then it's going to add this class animate, and it's going to animate our Thunderbox. And then I have set a timeout here to make it kind of go away after 5 seconds. But this doesn't work exactly like intended, and it's basically, since this is a loop, it's gonna go really fast through all of these frequencies. So every time it hits 45, it's going to add this class constantly. So unless it reaches underneath 45, this class is going to flicker a lot. That's, in a way, it's good, because if you think about Thunder, you do have some flickering, and I kind of wanted to do that. And this one was another way of importing this class directly here, but I have circumvented this and did it a bit smaller. I've done quite a few tests. and then it detects these peaks. Basically, this is a specific kind of line. I don't know. This is already going over my head how this is happening. And then it tries to repeat this. Basically, when this script has finished over here, it reloads the function, this function over here, to recheck it. So this is how the loop is going back and forth every time the sound is playing in the background. And this could be a disadvantage in the sense that if you mess up this loop, it could technically go non-stop, and this could crash your file, I mean your site, or your server actually, if if you're not careful. Your whole page will infinitely load, and your host might just crack. But of course, it's not as easy to do that. Basically, that's how, well, a sort of DDoS type of attack exists. You know, it creates this infinite loop, and then your server starts lagging more and more and more, and then it crashes or it shuts down or something. But yeah, of course, I don't think this script is capable of doing this, because we're just inputting this, we're repeating these values and this formula, and it's a simple formula. It's not a big algorithm or anything like that. And it's only based on the sound. And basically, when the sound stops, this one stops as well. If I release it, it's not working because, I don't know. I suppose yeah, if I mute it, it mutes the sound for us, but actually the music is still playing in the background. So the track has finished. That's the problem. So since the track isn't looping, it's this frequency is stopping. You see, it's still running here. But if I reload, and now if I stop, whoops, if I stop it, you can see it's going like and going and going and going. So yeah, it's a bit tricky. Anyway, But this is not the cool part actually. I haven't even showed you the cool part yet. Because, so okay, right now this is running as intended. We're under 42 or 48. I don't remember what I said. Yeah, you see, it's peaking now. And after 5 seconds it should disappear. Bam. I could have made it to fade out as well. But now since this is constantly going off the, I think 42 I said. It's constantly going over 42, it's gonna continuously reset the, I mean add the class of animation. Now it's going under 42, then it's gonna go up. So it's gonna look kind of flickery. Sometimes it doesn't act quite well, it's just popping up on and off, but I suppose this is because the browser can't keep up with the speed of this frequency. Yeah, it's finicky. Okay, so we have achieved this in the SVG. Perfect. Now you might wonder, okay, what if we want to import this SVG into a HTML file? And I have achieved exactly that. So if I'm gonna try to open the index, like so, we're going to have the same issue. It can't run directly through the file. So in this case, I'll have to access the file through the HTML page through the local host. Oh, it's running. But how is it running, you might wonder. Although I don't understand why the sound is kind of messed up. It's still working, but it sounds weird. So that might be an unintended thing that I might have accidentally done. But let's stop it. And let me show you something really cool. In this index, you might notice, well, ignore this, this is not applied. You might notice that we have an object ID. And then I have introduced the script here again. This script is in the HTML page, but we already have this script attached to our SVG inside the SVG file. Now the thing is, when you import the SVG as an object, it can't run the JavaScript unless it's very difficult to make it run if it's just referenced through the SVG. There are ways, but not through simple HTML. And or at least not simple ways, but there is a workaround. So basically, there is a big difference between this script and the one that we have here. Here, we do things when the page is loaded, or basically when our SVG is loaded. But here, we do something different. We look at this object and we set a variable here and we look into our HTML and we get this object and its ID. In this case, I gave it dynamic SVG. Okay. And then I say on loading of this object, which imports the SVG, I do the same thing. Basically, everything that's in here is also in here. I haven't changed anything. But the cool thing is that this SVG is external. So it isn't imported with the code inside our page. I know it sounds complicated, but it's actually a very, very important thing to understand. If I am loading the SVG here, you can see the code. So basically this is the raw code of the SVG. Of course it's collapsed. This is why we don't see the whole code, obviously. So when we are here, our object doesn't, it imports part of the code, but it's a reference of the code. It isn't the actual code itself. So you can think of this as a clone. And basically, what we did here in our JavaScript is say, look at this clone and look for its parent. And inside its parent, look for this ID, which is our Thunderbox. And this is the only way I found it to be able to work, to inject our JavaScript directly into this SVG as we are importing it here through this object. So basically everything works except for the sound. The sound sounds weird and I don't know why. So let me refresh here. Oh, let me remove this. You see? This is how it should sound. This is how it sounds here. I have no clue why. Perhaps I messed something in here through these tags. Because this is... Let me just stop it. But as you can see, it works perfectly. And my idea was to introduce this this element, this thunder thing, and put his eyes to glow when the thunder was happening. But I'm going to give up this this way specifically because the autoplay is disabled by default. Then our effects are not fully imported either. And then we have these issues with the sound and the way we have to make a lot of steps just to get to this point. Another way is to just copy the SVG code and manually paste it over here, and then the script might work better that way. But you have to format a lot of code manually. But it's possible. Although, as I said, yeah, some things might not be imported correctly, or they might not work, or maybe they could work if you have the technical know-how. There is a lot of coding involved to do that. Whew, so we went through some really cool things. I am really proud of what we have achieved. And I'm debating now. Now, I would have really wanted to keep this format and to kind of tinker further with it, but the fact that browsers automatically disable the autoplay, it's kind of a drawback. So there are other ways we can implement this. I think I'm gonna manually create a video using the image. So I'm gonna export this as an image. Sure, when we are going to expand it, it's gonna look a bit pixelated, obviously, because we're giving up the vector part. But the pixelation is gonna be difficult to spot. So yeah, hope this gave you some cool ideas. This is still a good practice if you want to manipulate things, not necessarily with sound, but if you want to translate an object inside an SVG or animate it somehow, You can do it via JavaScript externally through, actually, the way I have implemented it here with this script, I can go into Inkscape and just basically remove the external script itself. So basically I could just remove this line, and of course if I remove this line, then it will not work when I just use the SVG directly into the browser. So I kept both just for that particular thing. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it here for now, and we're gonna continue next time. Maybe it will look even better. You guys stay awesome. See ya. Bye 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 bye.